my name is Michelle Vaughan, and this is Jackie Delong. So the title of our session today is Creating Living Theories Through Love and Life-Affirming Energy, examining the role of living culture of inquiry to move from action research to activism. So the goal here is today is to talk about living theory research and what the impact has been on both of us, but then also our relationship as well, and then what that looks like as we continue to help you all build your own knowledge of living theory, and what that looks like as a form of activism, really. So if you were able to log on to Padlet, we can start there, but we can maybe just go around the room and talk about people's relationships with living theory as well. So on the Padlet here, we've got what is your current relationship with living theory research? So we've got I've never heard of it before. Thank you for your honesty. We've got it's my way of living. It allows me to live more authentically, to navigate the inherent tensions in living with others. Not heard of it before. And learning through living, growing up on a farm, being the only person in my family with a college education is constantly present in a consciousness as an action researcher. I'm aware that familial expectations may not always drive our self-interest, and recognize that in my students. Great.
Yeah. I haven't seen this before. This is one that Michelle uses with her online courses, and I've not seen this before. This is great. I love new stuff.
So we'll ask you again at the end what your relationship with living theory research might be. But to address the not heard of it before, you want to address that and give a little bit of a base?
Okay. So there are Liz Campbell, who's over here in the blue sweater, and myself and Michelle and Jack Whitehead are all part of the community of living theorists. And Jack originated this idea of living theory as a methodology because in his classes and in his research, he could find no way of explaining his educational influence with his students in the classroom using the education language from the disciplines of history and politics and science and all the other kind of disciplines of education. And so he created this living educational theory in which we are able to explain in an educational way how we influence others, in particular for all of us, how we influence our students. But it also can mean how we influence others in any variety of ways and any role in life. Okay?
Yeah.
And part of that process is using your values as explanatory principles in your life and ways of judging how you're doing. Okay? There's a slide actually here. I'm not too long to put it up.
What the culture?
Yeah, because it has the 3 tenets on it.
Okay, sure.
So just to give you a visual on it. So the first part is what I've been doing with my colleagues and students is I've been creating a culture of inquiry, which is a safe, supportive space where people can share their vulnerabilities, where they can be explicit about their values, where they can recognize when they're not living according to their values, which Jack has coined as living contradiction, and I'm sure we've all had that experience, to be loved into learning, which is a way that I teach students that Liz put the words to, and to recognize your embodied knowledge, and improve your lives and practices by creating your own living theories. So that's kind of what I've contributed to this body of knowledge. Living theory methodology is I at the center. So it is a self-study. So I, as a living contradiction, when I don't live my values fully. The use of action reflection cycles. The use of personal and social validation. So that using our own voices and the voices of others in our social group to help to validate our claims to knowledge. and the inclusion of life-affirming energy with values as explanatory principles of educational influence. So that's what the methodology is. It is the culture in which I believe we can develop that methodology. And I think that's kind of the premise upon which we all do our work.
And so this, minus all of the fun symbols, which used to be words, the title of this is Today's Goals, which we translated into these fun shapes. But some of the goals that we want to go through in this workshop are listed up here. And then we have a quick clip that we would like to show you about us actually discussing these goals when we sat down and talked about what this presentation might look like, so that you can hear us discussing what we hope for you. And then can have a conversation about how this has then become data for our presentation as well. But we're going to cover some of these things about sharing who we are and how we came to be here, how we build these cultures of inquiry, and then shift to you and talk about the values that you hold close to your heart, how you might improve on them, and how those might become your research, and what that research looks like and can look like in your own field, and where we go from there. So this is us discussing you before we even met you. Without natural sound. Hold on, let me process. Oh gosh. I'm going to play it on here, and then we'll try to project.
I have the transcript.
Sorry, guys. You can go ahead and read the transcript. I'll get the next one set up for us.
So what happened here, now, Michelle and I met last year, about the same time of year, at Alara in Vermont. Never met before.
What's the
Action Learning, Action Research
Association.
And the World Congress.
World
World Congress
Congress.
was in there too.
And she was in a workshop similar to this, and we talked very briefly at the end, and then we made connection afterward, and during that period of time, using Zoom, we worked together on her creating her own living theory, and in that period of time, she did a research. She is now published in the Educational Journal of Living Theories, and her paper is up there about the journey, and my paper is up there about the journey. So it makes it an interesting, different perspective on the process.
Okay, so I'm going to play the audio from here and hold it close to you guys, and we can just play the video here since you can't hear it. Maybe that will work?
Yeah, the activism stuff, I felt like spoke to me, especially, and it's almost like, I think when you hear the word activism, immediately you think about. Right, exactly. And I thought, no, I feel like this form of activism is about preservation, right? Like preserving your well-being, preserving culture of inquiry that is without ego, that is about others, and that is about research in a way that is beneficial, the well-being and the heart of the researcher.
Okay.
You know, so that they can go
I
out
stopped there.
and help save others.
So that was us really discussing, you know, what we were hoping that you guys were going to get out of this feeling that to be activists, you have to understand where it is that you're working from and understand what your own core values are so that you can go out and be activists in the world. And living theory is the methodology in which to do that, or one way to do that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to go into a little exercise that we'd like you to engage in. So you're going to need a partner. So some people are going to have to move.
You sure? You've got someone behind you too?
Oh, so sorry.
There, too. Okay.
So sorry.
So you would go and sit with Liz over there.
Odd layout. Nathan.
So if you were in Jackie and Marie's earlier a conference, I think you guys were both in there. But this will be a good pickup for you from your first conversation with values.
So the person that got up earliest this morning is partner number 1. Partner number 1 is going to be the recorder. Partner number 1 is going to listen to partner number 2 talk about what really matters to you. What gets you spark when you get up in the morning? What makes you feel really wonderful? And you're going to tell that little narrative to your partner. So, this is partner number 2 is going to be the speaker. Partner number 1 is taking the notes. And in the notes, you're going to write down what values you share as the other person is speaking. Okay, you follow me? At the end of 3 or 4 minutes, I'm going to say, sorry, I have to interrupt your conversation. Can you now let partner number 1 do the speaking? Same thing. Partner number 1 talks about what really matters to them. And partner number 2 is taking the notes. And then at the end, we're going to come back to the large group, and hopefully somebody will like to volunteer. Okay? Are we clear on the exercise?
Clarifying question.
Yep.
What values matter to us regarding our views on education or just life?
Anything. Absolutely anything. What are you passionate about?
Gotcha.
So you're just
I'm the scribe first.
okay, so what gives me great first thing in the morning? Being with my husband. Our kids work on some coffee, especially on the weekend after we go for a run together, just having a good time.
Okay.
We're also pretty spiritual, so we spend some time reading together, and
That was my thought.
we pray together. We both, I think we both take our jobs pretty seriously. I mean, he really enjoys what he does. He's an engineer. I do love teaching. I hate the other part that comes with it. But I love teaching. I love just being real with my kids. I think sometimes I learn from them and they learn from me. Because I really do try to encourage them to pursue things that make you curious. And, as I'm teaching, I tend to learn afraid of other things to college, so don't just go through the thing that you think is going to get you money and what makes you happy. It's like that whole corny, hey, if you love what you do, you'll never go straight in your life kind of thing. Because I think that there is some truth in that. Although I'm not going to say when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is, I'm supposed to teach. It's just once I'm there, it's pretty good. When I don't have meetings. One of the other things that gives me joy is just connecting back with my kids. I have 5 kids. So I try to talk to at least they're literally scattered all over the country sometimes. Just trying to figure out, make sure that we know where everybody is at figure out how they're doing, you know, like at least once a week. Which takes a lot of time, and we haven't yet for a couple of weeks, because I'm on the phone for like an hour. Or more, sometimes there's Sunday, 5 hours and they're out. But yeah, my kids and grandkids, those things give me a lot of joy. We try to figure out, you know, like music. I love music. That's not artistically gifted with visual arts, but I do have some gifts in the area of music. So when I get to sit down and just do music, that makes me really happy. My husband and I actually did music together for a good amount. I play piano, but my primary instrument really was, except for as I'm getting older, it's getting worse, I sang. And my husband's a drummer, so we actually met in a rock band. We were trying to be a rock band. Just a very straight
So you
story.
became a teacher and you became an engineer.
Yeah. Like, when you know it's not going to get out of somebody's garage, you know, you have to take plan B. But we've still done music together for, you know, for a lot of our lives, and just even instilling a love for music in most of my kids, you know, has been, although I know one of them is holding up. I know somebody has got to have like the voice, and I think it's one of my boys.
Yeah.
They're just holding out. But those are the things that just really, yeah, make me happy. And this is my dog. He used to give me a lot of joy. But it's like the opposite of the happiness. Just this home thing. Actually, I think I am probably more of a homebody than a hyper person.
Yeah, I think that's the relationship between all of these things, right? Is that it's all connects back to home.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Especially, it's very interesting since I did not have a great home life growing up. I mean, I got married very young. And when people say, how'd you get married? So I'm like, you don't get married at 19 if you've had a happy home life. And my husband came around at the right time. You know, it's like, not to take anything away from him, but, it worked out. I never, like, when my students go, Mrs. Vaughan, I feel like I was getting married for 2 years. I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it. It worked out for me, but it was almost 40 years ago. So, life is very different back then.
He was a drummer, I was a king,
Yeah, right.
part of a rebellious phase.
Yeah. Let's see. I guess that's
Okay.
it. There's going to be 3-4 minutes, right?
There's a lot of things in there.
Yeah, I think so.
That's amazing. Kind of a lot of pressure.
Oh gosh, no, that's just a big place. Very microcosmic life story.
I don't know that I'm passionate about that. Where do you live?
I live in Easton, Fort Township. Yeah, yeah. Looking to relocate to the Jersey Shore. South, in the May area, yeah.
Okay. So we swap.
So, sorry to interrupt you, but can we now switch partners? Thank you very much, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but, okay.
All right, what makes me passionate? What am I passionate about? I think education foremost. Mainly because it wasn't something that was genuinely fostered in my family growing up. I had posted on the app that they were using about I grew up on a farm. In the middle of nowhere. And no one in my family went to college. So there wasn't, I was never dissuaded to do it, but I was never encouraged to do it either, mainly because they wouldn't know what that would even look like how to make that happen for me. It's a very rural high school, so even the help from the school was not really present. It was very much like, we can help you sign up for SATs, and like from there it's on you, right? And those were the days of like paper applications and you know, like you know, common apps or anything like that.
Yeah,
right. So there was not a lot of help there, right? So I was like, well, I'm going to do this. I guess I'll figure it out, right? So I place a high value on education because I feel like it has saved my life. What else am I passionate about? farming, as it turns out, although I think it's very important. Now more than ever, maybe, because we're running out of food. But, I don't have that strong connection with family that you have, which is interesting. I do love my family, and I do call them every weekend. I have since I was a child, called my grandparents and my favorite aunt. And then my mother, once I moved out of the house, every Sunday since I was 16 years old. I've never missed a Sunday. So in that sense, I have like this connection with family, but not one that I feel like I have a really close bond with any of them necessarily. I think it's because I became independent very quickly. Like I knew this was not the life for me. I think it stemmed from a lot of things. Like I grew up in a very white area. Everyone was white. And like the things that I was hearing and the things that were going on in my community, I knew I couldn't subscribe to that. I didn't understand quite why. I knew I needed to get out of there, right? So that's why I turned to education. Why that's why I said it's safe. So now I believe in focused on social justice issues, and focused on making the world a better place for my students, for myself. I'm encouraged to help students find their vision of what happiness looks like for them, whether that's college or not. I have a very strong bond with my husband. We've been together 8 years. We've never had one fight. We are fascinated with our dog.
I get
I'll show you pictures later. We enjoy life. We don't complain about things. We don't get wrapped up in negativity. We're very much solution-oriented people, and I find that comfortable. Even living in New York City, it's easy to get sucked into that. And I feel like that's not who we are, just at our core, which is nice. We have a lot of great friends. We like sharing life with our friends. When we go on vacations, we try to take our friends with us.
Okay, sorry to interrupt again.
grounded in your home though, and you think you are.
Because I'm not interrupting
Yeah. Why don't, while we share some of this, why don't you guys, you wanna come in so we're closer, so we can kind of make a circle a little bit, since we have a smaller group? Then that will be nice.
So, we're wondering if you might be willing in the sharing to be videotaped. In this process, the visuals are very important. And if you read the paper that I wrote for EJOL's Educational Journal for Living Theories, you'll see that one of my means of conveying what I've learned and am learning is through dialogic research. So even though the first video didn't work, hopefully we can get the others to work, because the dialogue between us has created that educational relationship, but it has also given us the data to support our claims that we have educational conversations, that we are learning from each other, that we are, learning to live more fully our values every day. So if you don't want to, you just say no. So now we're looking for a volunteer to share what you learned in that conversation.
Okay.
Oh, Nathan, bless your heart.
So what I learned about Bernie, this is Bernie, everybody.
Hi, Bernie.
Everyone. Bernie is passionate about many things. So I'll give you a few, and then we were actually trying to make some connections about like what all this means, right? I turned into a little therapist.
That is a synonym for living theory.
Gosh. That's in my wheelhouse. Okay, so first and foremost, her relationship with her husband is very strong. They like their time together. That probably comes from having 5 children. They like the time that they have just for them, right? Whether that's participating in their spiritual beliefs, praying, reading together, or just spending time with each other. They are both passionate about their careers, even though their careers are separate entities. She being a teacher, her husband being an engineer, although you're engineering children's lives, right? You also share that passion of developing strong relationships with your students, like you have built with your kids and your husband. You believe in the learning of back and forth learning, not necessarily a one-way street. You are engaged in helping kids make positive and genuine life choices to better their own lives. You're a musical artist. Even though you say you don't sing as much as you used to, it's still in there. Your husband's a percussionist. And all of that kind of wraps up into like your home base being a very special place for you. And I think all of those things separately make up your home. And that's what I saw with what you were saying.
Very nice.
Anybody else like to share?
I'll go. So this is Rachel, and Rachel is humble. Took me a while to, I had to ask a couple of questions to get her to expand. But so she's very humble, but she's very passionate about everyone feeling like they have a sense of belonging. She is very passionate and excited about the interconnectedness of everything. Because at one point I asked her, well, because she started by talking about answering that question in the context of, say, like this conference, education. And then she's, it's all interconnected, and went on and about that. So she's very passionate about having authentic and meaningful learning for her students, and embraces things like mind-body learning and holistic learning, those kinds of things. Very passionate about environmental sustainability, to the point that it's part of her family and her family life. And experiential learning is also a priority for her. And then I asked her why she came to this particular workshop, and she said, well, it was the word love. So that tells me she's courageous, because she is in the science area in her school, and it's not often that people in that, but she's also the director for action learning in her school now too, so a nice blend of all those things. She's very creative, and her mother called her a grower of souls, so you can see where she gets her creativity from. But I thought that was, after just speaking to her for a few short minutes, I thought that was a pretty good description of what she, and I've only told you some of the things, there's many more, but she's a pretty special woman.
Right back at you.
We've got two really good examples here. So if we were to continue to work through the process, doing this kind of research, so we would look at those things that you value, and you would say to yourself, okay, within that constellation of values, what is it that I would like to improve? And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about classroom or at work or home. Within that, the ones you've just articulated, what ones would you like to actually live more fully so you could improve what you do?
And I remember being in a similar session, right, last summer, and being interested in living theory research and knowing that my values were important to me, similar to Rachel, right? Yeah. But not being able to answer that question right away, right? Because it is difficult to make that transition to, well, what does that mean for research? And I think, part of the journey that I went on, as I would call myself a novice living theory researcher, so I'm still probably using the term wrong, living educational theory researcher, is to figure out where there was a problem that needed to be investigated and where the living contradictions were. And so, when I kind of did the deep dive and thought, well, you know what, connection is like really important to me, my students. I don't know why, I always kind of felt like, oh, I'm a really good teacher. Like I just really like my students, you know, or, you know, when we learned about withedness in teacher education, I thought, I got that. I know what that looks like, you know? I mean, I can see what they need. And it felt like a little bit like a superpower, right? That you could kind of be a really good teacher. But when I really started to think about what it is that made me a good teacher, I talked to other of my students, it allowed me to see where there were parts of my practice that were a contradiction. So, and I share this as an example to kind of start to maybe frame your thinking about research a little bit more. A lot of my research, a lot of my teaching is online. And so I am somebody who teaches based off of connection, and I could never see my students. I could never, I mean, I was trying to get meaning from them, from their work, and this is where and I liked to teach online, but I didn't feel fulfilled, like when I sat in front of a group of people, and I had this exchange of energy, and I had this great, you know, conversation with people, and you leave class feeling like a little bit of a high, but I could never get that teaching online. And so that was where I realized, okay, how can I do this? How can I be me? How can I live my values in an environment that doesn't necessarily support connection? And then began my work. So that might be a place that you can think about. Where are my values kind of almost like a dam, right? Getting stuck there, not being able to flow freely because of context or even the nature of your job. So as you think about what's important for you, can you think about where you would like to be more yourself? And that might help you decide where to start for a research question, and then what to collect as a follow-up.
So it doesn't just have to be Rachel and I've got your name? Bernie. It can be any one of you. So just to think about, you've articulated what really matters to you. So within what you've talked about, is there some place in there that you're not living that value quite as much as you'd like to be living it? Is there some place in where you think, I could just do better at that, I could improve that, especially have had a little help along the way? So does anything come to you when you think about that? Because we're working toward a research question. Okay?
Yeah, for me, I have a hard time sometimes drawing out quieter students. You know, it's easy the ones that are popping their hands up all over that are very active. And you know, I'm thinking back this past year that there was one particular group that I had that it was like I had a room full of quiet people who didn't really know each other, and I tried to build, you know, and there were more relationships, but sometimes, like, you know, it was my first block, one of my first blocks in the morning, and I could hear them all chatting, and I walked in, I'm like, oh great, it's great to hear you all chatting, I'm glad to hear your voices and making jokes, and then like, it's like, I was kidding, and it's like, wow, you know, and trying to generate, so how, I'm trying to figure out how I can draw out those shyer ones that are super shy, that even when you call on them, they will give you like a one-word answer. So that's something that I could be doing better.
Okay, so let's keep working on this idea. So what might a research question be, given that that's an issue that you'd like to do a better job on? What might the question be? And we start with I, right? How
Right.
might I?
How might I encourage more introverted students to, I don't know, step out of their comfort zone a little bit, to be more active participants in class discussions? Like I have to write these things down and then tweak them about 1,000
That's
times.
okay, that's what, this is exactly what you go through, because you start with something that you'd like to do better, and then you know, it doesn't have to be the perfect question. I mean, the question, certainly in my research, changed many times. So, I mean, it's, what you're doing now is you're trying to kind of bring it down to something that's doable. I mean, I would like to erase children in poverty in the world, right? I don't have that kind of power or control, so it has to be a doable question. So within what you can do, and what is it that you could do that would help those children, I don't know, relate more to you, relate to the group more, feel more safe? You know, you start playing with the whole ideas inherent in this issue.
You know, when Nathan shared this, I'm wondering if Nathan has insight about why Bernie feels, after talking to her, why she feels it's important to get the quiet kid out. Because maybe that is obviously important for you, right? Because something tells you that the quiet kid's lack of engagement means something to you, which might mean something different to that kid, right? But we're working on you, right?
Shouldn't raise my
But
hand.
no, but from what Nathan shared about you and how important family was to you and how important community was to you and time with others, it sounds like you might be equating that child, that quiet child, with not engaging in the community and the family of your classroom. And it's like, how can you bring the family in, right? How can you, like you said, you heard them all talking and you thought, oh, okay, great. The family's ready for me.
Right.
I am ready to go in. But when they get quiet, you feel, what, they're not engaged anymore?
I feel that they're, for whatever reason, they're reluctant. They just get, and I'm not a sage on the stage kind of teacher. That's just not how I operate. I mean, it actually, that particular group in the beginning, until I just got used to this is the way they are, I was uncomfortable. Sometimes they were so quiet. It was like, well, this is really disturbing.
Yeah.
And I'm trying not to, is that my insecurity that I'm projecting onto them?
Right.
Okay, they don't want to talk for some reason. Is there something about me that's making them, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
I do. Yeah, absolutely.
do tend to, yeah.
Yeah.
So are you all right to stay with us, or would you like a rest from it and we'll come back?
Go on to somebody else.
Okay, all right. So, Rachel, same question. So within the constellation of values, is there something there you're thinking, I could do a better job of this?
So the first thing that went through my mind, and is how I'm perceiving your question, which is the alignment of value with practice,
That's
which is
right.
something I think a great deal about in terms of teaching philosophy, is aligning value with pedagogy, with assessment, with, metacognition. So the very first thing that comes to mind for me is sitting in the multiple chairs of, I believe that I disalign when I sit at administrative tables. So I have the dubious pleasure of sitting at the administrative table. It's a legislatively funded science initiative that funds the program that I direct. It's the Learning Actively Mentoring Program is the name of it, LAMP. And so there's a very big disalignment for me in where I have to sit at that administrative table and my values. And being able to truly embody those values in any given moment at a table that is very much controlled by or fraught with legislative, political values of the state of Wyoming, but I have to sit in that dissonance in order to then direct a program that is subverting in so many ways those values. So I don't have a research question for you right now regarding that disalignment, but it's something interesting to ruminate on.
Yeah.
And I like that you bring it up.
Certainly is your contradiction, right?
Yeah, she's identified the contradiction
Well,
first,
that's
right?
Those grinds, right? And so I'm a queer theorist as well, so I think a lot about living in the dissonance and what we gain from living in the dissonance. So I would need to take a lot of time about reconciling. So I think there's great value in living in the dissonance. So maybe the research question is, do we have to align our values with our practice in all ways in order to have power, and to feel as though, yeah,
We can affect change.
we can affect change,
Right,
right?
right.
Yes, good, yes.
Yeah, could I just mention that in 1984, one of the key researchers was called Barry MacDonald, and he had the same problem. And he developed this notion of what he called creative compliance.
Yes.
So what you were describing there was a tension which you'll live with at the administrative table.
Yeah.
What you would also then show is what you're doing in the project where you're actually living your values as fully as possible, but at the administrator table you're engaged in creative compliance. Yeah.
Yes.
But that was a really exciting inquiry.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful term, and it really does describe
Absolutely, it's wonderful.
the dance. It's a
Yeah,
dance.
that's
yes.
right.
Can I just add a little bit to it too, because this was a big part of my struggle too, was, you know, the contradictions where I didn't think I had, and you used the word power, and I didn't want power, but I wanted to be able to affect change,
Yeah.
right? And so I struggled, but in the end I realized, you know, that it is in that dissonance
Yeah.
that the most growth can take place. And not that you have to start with a problem. You can start with something you're doing really well. And just say, you know, why is this working? And how can I do it even better? Or how can I share it? Or what, you know, what should I do next kind of thing, you know? So it doesn't even have to be problem-based, right? But I think what I came to realize was that, you know, like the interconnectedness and everything, but it's okay for some, you know, yin and yang and dissonance, and it's not necessarily all, you know, what we would call a false dichotomy, right? It's possible for things to coexist in an effective way.
And still live your values.
And still live according to your values. That's exactly what I mean. So that's what living theory did for me. It allowed me to navigate a way to coexist within that dissonance and still have a purposeful life.
And I think that last piece is really important, Liz, and that's why I think the research is important. So your research about trying to figure out how to navigate the dissonance and how to still be at your best and fulfill your own values is very important for someone who's just like you to read, right? Because that's where your values, I think, you know, we have this kind of disillusioned thought about, well, we go, especially if you're in a PhD program, am I generalizable, am I this, am I that? But if we are looking to make change, to affect other humans and to live more fully our own values, then this is the most important work. Because this is what I want to read, right? And this is what changes the way I think. And so, for those who are in that fight, you know, this is the work that's closest to your heart, and I think it becomes more meaningful. I haven't picked up my dissertation in a decade.
It's time you did.
Well, it's not connected to me, you know, and I think that's important. You know, you want something connected to you.
Yes.
Is there anybody else that would like to talk about a possible question or what you might like to share with the group?
I'd like to hear what she thinks about Stephanie's values and vice versa.
You were quiet ones.
Well, just because you weren't quiet when you were engaged, right? There's a lot of neat energy there.
Can we get you to share?
So both of us are you're in second year as well, right? So we're both in our PhD programs in different parts of the world. And what I gained from Emily's discussion about values was her, like, she started off extremely broad, but it was very sincere, and I related to that, is this deep rooted desire for happiness, and not just her own happiness, but I think you mentioned, and I don't even know if you did it consciously, but you mentioned other people before having mentioned yourself. And this atmosphere of happiness is important to Emily. And then she furthered it by saying, well, what it looks like is, you know, bringing laughter and bringing humor and bringing lightness or whatever to all your interactions that you have. And that will consequently be able to bring you through, and we could say, like, to further this discussion, difficult, possible contradictory situations is when you bring, you know, an air of positivity to it. I related to that a lot because, like Liz and I talked a lot about this morning, is one of my main values. If you distill all of it, I very much enjoy, not just in my teaching practice, but outside, when people come to me and talk about their lives, I just feel really, really special when students tell me, like, the example that I told you girls is like, yes, okay, whatever, reading this novel made me think about this or made me personally connect to this character. Of course, that's great. That's the goal of an English teacher. But I love, like, when my students tell me that they have their period or that they, like, are feeling sad or that they're feeling super happy about something or, like, this person dumped them, because I've always been in the position where I dump myself onto people, and I just feel it's so beautiful when someone comes back and not dumps, but, like, you know, I like it. I think that these intimate interactions, and it goes back to that happiness that you spoke about, are so authentic, and they're the basis upon which I have more faith in humanity. And that leads to my contradiction, because I feel like in English class, we're so inextricably linked with humanity that I see when we ask kids to be critical and creative, I'm seeing these total blocks that are happening because they're societally learned. And students aren't being authentic, and they're repeating almost verbatim back what society has told them to think is free. And so that's the contradiction I'm negotiating, is like just like my pure love of these really, really authentic kind of non-polished interactions that you can have with anybody, like a grocery store person or, you know, your best friend, or your student, whatever, anybody. And then recognizing that in our discipline where we're supposed to be fostering that, we're just repeating the status quo of what looks like freedom.
So you have a question, don't you?
Yeah.
She's ready.
So let's talk about what data Stephanie's gonna collect.
Okay, we'll get back to you, Nathan.
Oh,
So,
You don't need to.
just so we get the full cycle in. All right, so what's your question is, how can you encourage more authentic conversations?
Yeah, like I'm specifically dealing with having students be more critical and not just accepting status quo ideas of normality. And that goes into all types of things, you know, what it is to be normal, what it is to be, you know, we have a stock idea of creativity that's being regurgitated back out in my conversations in class. And these little really authentic moments of, hey, I have my period, so that's why I'm a bitch today. Like, I have my students tell me that, and I'm like, you're beautiful. And it's like, but yet they don't see the inherent humanity in those types of interactions of coming up to your teacher and telling them, like, hey, like, so-and-so dumped me. Like, I think that's beautiful. Not that he dumped you, but that, you know, like, you're telling me, right? More so than you saying something extremely eloquent and, like, lacking in humanity that you feel makes you look smart.
So let's talk about what you might do to investigate that question. Let's just get, what are let's say two things that you might do that where you might collect data on your day-to-day interactions with these kids that would help you see how you might improve that, what you clearly value.
So I've been planning on observing my own practice.
Okay. How would you do that?
By taking notes.
Yeah, and
Well, I have a specific methodology, a specific pedagogical strategy that I want to implement in that I'm hoping will help increase that type of more authentic exchange.
have you ever used a camera?
Yeah, I know, you guys talked about that. Okay, I'm gonna try.
Well, you know what? It's very intimidating to start with. Everybody that's done it will tell you it's very intimidating to start with. I mean, Michelle and I joked that there's one of our clips where there was 4 minutes where we're checking.
Primarily me checking my camera. You can say thank you, it was me. It was
No,
me just checking
we
my
deleted
camera.
that. We don't want everybody to see that. But anyway, you don't have to show anybody what's on the camera. I mean, it's your information. You just park it at the back of the class, and you turn it on, and that's whatever you decide to do with that is up to you. But it's like having another pair of eyes in the classroom. It is, seriously. You see things that you would never otherwise see. You see when you have certain things you continually do, you hear the language that you use, everything is on the camera, and then you can go back and look at it when things are quiet, and you can do that observation. It also provides the data to support or contradict your claim to have done something that you think is improving that authentic conversation with the students. Are you following me on this? So you don't need somebody on the camera. I mean, today we're lucky we've got Jack with us, but when in the earlier workshop when we were all working, we just parked it, and you knew that you didn't want to get too far in the frame, and if you did, the audio is still there. So what else might you do about data?
I was planning on also doing interviews with students following our unit
Okay?
and seeing whether or not my actual aim of criticality, of like increased criticality, was transmitted through this new pedagogical style.
Okay, what else?
That's it. That's all I
I
have.
think that's a lot. She's got the video and she's gonna ask
I
the
just don't have
students.
the video actually, but I've got my observations and
Well, you could keep a journal.
yeah.
You could make
Oh,
a,
yeah.
keep a little notebook, write down what kids say, you know, what teachers say. You could ask the teachers if they
Yeah.
see any difference in the behavior in the kids in other classrooms or situations or, you know, and free time.
Right. Okay.
Anything else?
I think like from our conversation, what kind of struck me in terms of the values that you were discussing around that connection and that trust, and I think she said that you asked the same question as well around what is it that you do to engender that trust or that reciprocity, and I think so I wonder if there's a link to the data collection in terms of, you know, if you're vulnerable or if you trust or if you share something that's authentic, what does that then lead to? And almost, you know, comparing that with when you don't do that, or, and seeing, you know, and kind of playing a little bit with that, because and I think maybe it links back to, you know, how do you draw out introverted students? Sometimes people need that space, that silence, so that they'll feel it themselves. But also sometimes they do need that trust. How you, I don't know, there's something maybe there around that interaction.
Some of those practices where you use time.
Your willingness to be vulnerable drives out their willingness to be vulnerable.
Right. That's what equals said too.
That's
Missing permission to be
That's a
imperfect.
significant point, Emily, that if you want to build relationships, one of the things you have to do is you have to be willing to be vulnerable. Because that's what people, then they relate to you as a person as opposed to whatever position you have. And certainly I found that in my research.
Yeah, I think there's also, I mean, and what your kind of discussion triggered in mine around the kind of living contradictions, which isn't what I'm about to share, slightly part of that, but there is an element for me. I don't work in education, I work in corporate environments, and there's a real push to be more authentic in terms of leadership. But what I think we're noticing, we being like a kind of a network of female researchers and practitioners that I interact with, is the challenge of people in a position of power being too authentic, to the point where they're actually putting their emotional burdens on their employees or their students. So there's a really tricky balance in the way that we discuss how to be authentic and how to be vulnerable in a way that is boundaried, in a way that is protected. And I don't know how we navigate that balance yet, but I think that's something that we.
That sounds like some interesting research.
That sounds like
Yeah.
research
Study.
Have you read some of Brene Brown's stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I feel like that is exactly what I hear when you say that, like this whole notion of like dumping, right?
Yes.
Is that doesn't count as vulnerability, right? When you're just dumping your stuff. But I think you learn a lot, you know, as I shared, you know, I was trying to find ways to connect more, you know, with my own students. And so part of the living theory is having these action research cycles within studying your own living theory. So that's how I see the action research cycles, as really like the means to the end. You know, things that you're doing within your own practice to get closer to your own values. And so once I discovered a little bit of the contradiction between who I wanted to be and who I thought I could be online, you know, I initiated a couple of things within my practice. And one of them was making sure I always had a video on, right? I was more than happy to have a Zoom conference and just turn the videos off. You know, I mean, I was likely at home with my children running behind me. You know, nobody needed to see that. And so I thought, it's just easier if nobody turns on their video. But as part of this commitment to try to connect with my students, I turned it on and kept all the data. So since we have almost every tech issue that has happened to mankind, but we are blessed with a small group. If you wouldn't mind, I'll show you one of the videos that was one of my students, Afifa, so that you can see part of what I was counting data. She's in my action research course.
I'm enjoying this. I really like the, you know, just the whole working one-on-one with kids. It's, you know, the kids that fall through the cracks that you just kind of, they get. He's ELL, and he was not classified as ELL, so when I brought it up again this year, they were like, I don't know why he wasn't.
Oh, man.
Wow. You know, this kid has been struggling all these years, and now, you know, he's in 7th grade, and it's really hard for him, but I really enjoyed this. This is it's something I would want to do again, I think.
Yeah, I think what's great is that, you know, there's so many things that we know in education work. Like, we know working one-on-one with kids work, but then you get bombarded with so many other programs and initiatives and this and that, you know, sometimes you lose some of those practices or you lose time to do them. So this is like a great affirmation.
Yeah, and the fact that I have the leeway of being able to, because the intensive reading, like I mentioned before, I create the curriculum for that class. So I'm not obligated to follow whatever the district and the other reading classes have to do. So I have that leeway of being able to give the students what they really need, what's tailored to their needs, without worrying about the time crunch and all the other, you know, standardized testing that they're constantly bombarded with. And he's actually, this week they were taking a USA test in his English class. And I asked him how he was doing, because I know it's hard for him. He can't read it, but he has to take it because he's a 7th grader. So he was like, it's really hard. It's hard. It's really hard for me. So.
You know, I think you also are making a strong argument for the benefits of teacher-created curriculum, especially when students are not within that normal bell curve. You know, when you're dealing with students who have fallen through the cracks or been failed by traditional curriculum, you're making a really good argument for curriculum that's based on student needs, which is awesome.
So Afifa was in my the capstone action research course for the master's program and wanted to do her action research project on, she initially had this big idea that this massive project, and then she sent me an email and said, am I allowed, does it count if I just do it with one student? I said, absolutely, you're gonna change his life. So she created this whole project, and you know, I thought, okay, great, and we had the camera on, and we were having conversations. I thought, you know, she's in her bed, this and that, and I'm sitting in my house, and then at the end of the semester, she wrote what a difficult time she had had, and I included this in my article too, that in her review, I really was unsure, I really was uncomfortable, and seeing you and having us, you know, you confirm that what I was doing was okay, really, you know, made me now a lifelong action researcher. And I don't say that to like, I mean, it feels nice, right? But that was connection, right? And I'm not sure that connection would have happened if I didn't find ways to try to let that come through in a more meaningful way. But it did, and you know, it was a confirmation for me that, you know, this data was really, really, really important as evidence for my values.
The visual data.
The visual data. The visual data was really, really important. Yeah.
It's not negotiating IRB with all the visual. I mean, it sounds totally doable. I just wanted to hear you talk about it.
You know, I've got a number of students who are And I had that same question when I came to Alara last year, and I remember asking Jack about that question. And I have found that a number of my students are actually exempt from IRB because they are working in the States, because they're working within their own classrooms. And there seems to be a general, they don't really care what you do in your own classroom. You know, these students are in here anyway, and they have not had an issue collecting visual data in that way. But that's specific to, you know, my context. And
Liz, you can talk.
Yeah. So, and also if you're doing self-study, right? Then,
Sure.
Then, and it's not going to change anyone's life in a, you know, so, or you can encounter what I encountered, which was a lot of pushback, and so in the end, I didn't use any video in my PhD dissertation, but I sure used it to inform my thinking and my acting, and so, but then I found it also very hard to write about those instances, and that's when I made use of methodological inventiveness, and used poetry and art, and to sort of get on the inside of what I was feeling and where the gap between the words was, and things like that. So, and then in my master's, I mean, we just resubmitted, and Jackie was tenacious, and we got it through. And it's just like a matter of tweaking the wording sometimes.
I mean, we needed permissions. You need permissions. You need written permissions.
You only need written permission though if you're going to publish it.
That's right.
But if you're just using it for your
sharing
own,
it in some way.
yeah.
That's right.
New York
I was
City
thinking
has
about
a
Stephanie for like, you
zero
know, you're talking about some
policy.
sensitive.
You
video.
cannot film
Oh, yeah.
kids for any reason.
Yeah,
You're not supposed to work in your own classroom in New York City.
You can. You just cannot video kids for any reason in New York City. DOE.
Us, it's like not that you can't video them, but you do have to get rev if you're using it even for your own purposes. So
You don't need permission to put the camera on yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
But if their voices can be heard, and this is
Yeah.
what I was writing
You have
into
to be
in the
very
PhD.
careful.
yeah.
But you have to know your own laws and your own rules, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a teacher's responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that's what IRB is for, right? They'll tell you.
Yeah. And I found one of my colleagues who does a lot of work on her own practice uses the swivel camera a lot, which is, you know, the camera that just you wear it follows you. Yeah, you put it where you need to, and so she doesn't quite have to worry about it. Doesn't you know, she's a mover, so it would be difficult to just have one standing camera unless, you know, Jack was going to come and follow you around in your classroom.
You probably would if you asked him.
But the swivel is a great new tool for those who want to study their own practice. A lot of our school districts bought a couple of them, and they're sitting gathering dust.
That's what you found.
That's what I found. I said, "Who is a swivel?" And one of my students is a district employee. She says, "I have about 5 of them in my closet." It's like, "Can I have one?" She said, "Yeah, sure." So, you know, they're out there, and that's a great way to capture data as well. But I have found that it has become the onus of me and some of those, you know, that I work with to help inform IRB versus the other way around.
Our challenge is we have a lot of undocumented students.
I
Cannot
see,
film
yeah.
them. Like, it's dangerous for them, right? So that is a big thing for New York, I think.
But you can get permission from adults. You know, you've got colleagues that would.
But even their
But
parents
even
would be
asking
No,
for permission,
undocumented,
the
right?
New York City
Right.
DOE overshadows all of that. So like, through Fordham, I did an IRB through Fordham, but if you do it in New York City public schools, they also have their own IRB. So even though it passed Fordham's, it won't pass New York City's, you know, necessarily. But to your point of, I think there's still value in, even if you cannot film your students, if you're doing a small group or whatever, I think there is value in just having that camera on you, right? Even if you can't see any of the other
Right.
kids, but just seeing your reaction to what's happening, there is some value in that. Like, as far as data collection, I don't know what you could do with that necessarily, but for your own practice, I think it's
How does
helpful.
New York City, I mean, are people not getting nationally board certified in New York City?
They're not research studies. So to get your certification, you need to film yourself teaching,
Right.
but that's not
It's
for
not for
you have to
research.
That's not
So
for-
you can for national
but not
boards.
but not for
And-
publication.
And TPA. They
Okay,
have to
but
film
Correct.
not,
themselves.
but
But
not
that's
for,
not for
okay,
publication.
Okay, Okay, so there's
Columbia,
wiggle
they
room. There's wiggle
So
room somewhere.
you can film them when it benefits the state.
Yeah, right. So you just have to find a way to get your research to benefit the state.
That's fair.
Columbia's
Okay, I'm going to move on to just
Yeah.
because we're going to move short. So, in this research, in terms of validation, okay, so you need validation is triangulation in our description of it. 3 sources of data that support your claims to know. So your voice in journal, your voice in what you write, that's one voice. So the second voice can be a student, it can be a parent, it can be a colleague, it can be a fellow researcher. So that you need to collect that data. Third can be literature. It can be any other source out there that you can use to support your claim to know. So the process requires rigorous validation. I do not allow any students to put out a claim, I've done this and this, without how do you know. It's always how do you know.
And I had the benefit of having student evaluations on file. So I went back through like 7 or 8 semesters of student evaluations to start to figure out what my students were saying about me, because I wasn't quite sure who I was, which is why the title of mine is Learning Who I Am, of my article. So that some of this is pre-existing data, right? You might have data already in your student evaluations, or things that are just lying around, or things, thank you notes that students have written to you, or letters of recommendation that have come, that will give you a step 1 in trying to find some data that can support your claims.
If I can just jump in very quickly, I created a living wall, Michelle.
You did?
Yeah, that's what I called it, a living wall. And it was kind of cool because it just went through all those things, old student evaluations, thank you cards, notes, anything and everything made its way up and onto the wall. Emails, everything. But what was really cool, so I had taken over a bedroom upstairs, and people they'd come up there to see me because that's where I was for 2 years. And they'd come in and they'd say, oh, that's cool, what is that? And they'd start looking at the wall. I had quotes up there, and then, I had markers, and I was coloring things. And so you'd engage in some kind of dialogue. And then they'd say something about something they read. And I'd be, wow, that's, I never thought of that. That's really, can you put that on a sticky and we'll stick it up there? So it really did become this, interactive living wall. And so that, helped me with the triangulation. But wow, and what a meaningful and authentic, connection with people. And it could be anybody. It could be one of my son's friends, or, anybody that just said, oh, I haven't seen Liz in 6 weeks. I'm going to go upstairs and say hello, right?
You guys have the benefit of working, with older students or adults who are, if you're not in, it doesn't have to be in a classroom, right? Who can have those conversations with you about your practice. And when I had conversations with my students where I said, this is who I think that I am. Can you confirm or deny based on your experience, and tell me a little bit about it?
Grades are done.
That's right. Yeah, I did wait till grades were done. Absolutely. And then I had a couple of them the next semester in class as students again, and some of them said, when I started to give more online feedback and video feedback where they could see my face, they would say, I see what you're doing here. I see what you're doing and it's working, And so it was this evolving, study of my practice that kept getting hit on in multiple ways. And it was really not only affirming for my practice, but I said to Jackie in one of our conversations, it became so much less about being better at what I do and more about just being a better person, because you couldn't turn it off, right? So
Yeah, I have to warn you.
I would sit next to somebody, at a conference or wherever, and say, "But am I connecting with you right now?" And it became. I really started to just embody it in a way that was outside of the classroom, and that's why I think when you come to some of these living theory sessions and everybody's out there and there's tears and we're saying it changed my life, is because of that, because it is a synonym for therapy, and because it is about having your inside come out. So if you have any inclination whatsoever to get started on some of this work, I would encourage you, from me being in your exact seat last year, to do it, because therapy is expensive. So,
Well, thank you.
yeah, thank you for engaging in something that was completely different than what we had intended. You know?
We had all these lovely videos.
We did, you know, but it's okay because, you know,
We got 4 projector screens. And
I nothing. And he's like, he gave up. He was like, I don't know. I'm like, all right, thanks. I feel validated.
Yeah.
Just before you all go, because certain things were happening that I could see on the video, which it feels to me are really important, I'm hoping there's going to be some way of sharing this. You know, it can be on a private sector, but there was something that was happening. For example, Liz, at a particular moment, and you've opened the space up here, Liz, actually, I think in relation to yourself and then you, opened up in a way that you then responded and your voice came into the group. Am I making sense here? Now, this has been picked up. You know, the video has, and those moments, I think, are really important. As you were talking, your absolute central tension that you're facing for an inquiry, it's like with Michelle last year, 12 months ago. Yep, then working with Jackie. Yep. So I'm hoping that there's some kind of conversation can develop as you opened it up for us, you know, as you were talking about what was of value to both. Sorry, I just wanted to mention that because the data, the visual data, I think you'll find really important.
If you leave me your email and you would like to a copy of the data, or you'd like to continue to talk about what you might investigate in your practice, then I will promise you I'll be back in touch with you.
She will. In a very efficient manner.
via video.
Yeah, I mean, in a quick way. So definitely take the opportunity. Thank you guys for coming and being flexible in our format. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Let's hope it's just the start of a conversation.
Yeah.